Good evening, everyone. In tonight's talk, I'm speaking to Danielle Gillan, a former nurse and now a long COVID podcaster and advocate, and also a mother. Yeah, welcome, Danielle. It's great to have you on the conversation this evening.
Yeah, I was so excited when we connected, and
Mm,
I'm so proud of the work that you're doing and the content that you're
mm,
creating for everyone, not only in the US, but all over the world.
mm, mm. Thank you so much, Danielle. Yeah, it's been quite a transition. I used to do more like music and like hobby covers, that kind of stuff on my channel, and I think I would never have started making this content unless I'd really experienced a life-changing condition like this. But I'd love you just to tell us a bit about your story, your life prior to the pandemic, and what led to you to start keynote speaking and this long COVID podcast. Yeah.
Well, it was really wild. I was a bone marrow transplant nurse, a pediatric oncology nurse, and prior to getting COVID, I was an advocate and I helped run a nonprofit. And I used to lobby in Washington to give kids equal access to care. So it's really crazy. Everything that I have done for children, find myself doing it for myself. And I was always very passionate about serving other people who were underserved, underrepresented. And now I find myself in the same position today with long COVID. Um,
Yeah,
so
that's incredible. Yeah.
yeah, was that good enough? So
That's
if,
perfect. Yeah.
yeah, sorry.
How was your health and fitness prior to the pandemic
Oh
and
my
your
gosh,
COVID-19 infection? Yeah.
health and fitness. Like
Mm,
I used to go, go, go. Like nobody could stop me, whitewater
mm,
rafting, climbing mountains, running half marathons, mainly running half marathons to raise money for pediatric cancer.
mm,
I'm happy to say that I've decided to run another half marathon in January. I
mhm.
may not finish, so I've already accepted that, but I'm already thanking my past self for giving me that earlier start time. So maybe I'll
Wow.
finish, but
Mm.
I'm not willing to hurt myself.
Yeah,
So, but I
yeah.
still want to raise money for pediatric cancer. So
Incredible,
I did
incredible.
anything I
Yeah.
wanted to,
Mm,
just like you
mm,
did,
mm.
right?
Yeah, yeah. Most things I was doing. I wanted to ask in terms of the pandemic, what was your date of your COVID infection, and how did you figure out that something had gone wrong? And actually, I'm not getting better. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened was I had a pretty severe infection. So what happened,
Mm,
my friend had come over, and I believe it was my friend that was the one who exposed me because back then it was like she had anxiety and depression. And so we sat in a car unmasked and we cried. And I was like, I'm here for you. Well,
mm,
she leaves. And then that morning I woke up and I couldn't move. And it was just like I had never felt the sense of gravity ever in my life. And I struggled to just walk, and I knew something was wrong.
mm,
So there's a clinic right in front of my neighborhood. So it's not even a mile away. I went there,
mm,
I stayed in the car, I got tested, and I had them open the doors to my room. I had my kids, my husband everywhere because I understand infection control. And I went into my room and I locked my door, and I didn't come out for like 14 days. And I had what was
wow.
called a cytokine storm. If I describe my infection, my entire body was burning. I couldn't
Mm,
see. Experienced a lot of GI and kidney um, issues. Uh, my brain. I would always, for 3 days, all I said was my brain and water, and I was terrified. So, you know, I couldn't even say what was wrong with me because I struggled to see, I struggled to speak, I struggled to move. And
mm,
it really was, I did have somewhat of an outer body experience. And being that I worked with children with cancer, I really felt like all the little angels on the other side, they like rallied and told me what to
mm,
do. And I
mm,
feel like they were a big part of why I survived that. And
mm, mm.
it's hard to,
Wow.
it's hard to talk about the
Mm,
initial infection. But
mhm, mhm,
so finally I was able to, and this is kind of how I figured out what was wrong with me and what was happening to me. um so finally on my 13th day, right,
yeah.
uh I got up and I could feed myself. And it was pretty much, I was just going to grab whatever I could. And I ate, a muffin, coffee with cream and sugar, and cereal with milk. And you understand, like inflammatory triggers, it was like, hello, hello. I like double downloaded on all of it, right?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my God. So then guess
Mm.
what happened? All my symptoms came back and I was
Wow.
terrified. I went to the emergency
Mm,
room and I was always able to breathe. So
mm,
they would never treat me. And I remember, being in healthcare and know that I'm struggling, knowing that my entire body's on fire and I'm having a hard time seeing and I'm having a hard time it was terrifying, right? And the doctor, this is what I'll never forget, is that the doctor was in everything, covered up from head to toe, standing in the corner of the room, unwilling to touch me,
mm, mm.
and because I could breathe, he said I needed to go home and fight it on my own. And he didn't even
Wow.
give me discharge instructions in the room. He called the
Mm,
phone in the room and had
yeah.
me reach and pick it up and whatever.
Mm,
So
wow.
then it was just like starting all over again. You know how with long COVID, we relapse and remit, right? Like we'll
Yeah,
have periods
yeah.
of time where we do pretty good. So
Mm,
people think we're better, but we're not. And
yeah.
then something flips the switch, and then we find
Like a
ourselves,
like a flare up, yeah. I've heard
yeah,
that term before, yeah.
yeah. And a lot of people
Wow.
can
Wow.
relate to like dermatitis or colitis. Like they understand what those kind of flares look like. But most of our
Mm,
flares are
mm,
neurologically based. They're in our brain. So just
mm,
like people can have a seizure, right? And you
mm,
may not be
mm,
twitching and having like muscle movements, right?
mm.
And you could still be having seizures. Our neurological condition can be very similar to that. And it's
Yeah.
exhausting,
Mm,
you know?
yeah. Mm,
So
mm,
I came home and then it took me a long time. And initially, um, I started, focusing on what I could control, and that was what I put in my mouth, what I did, and
mhm,
I would do all the things that I would normally do, and then I just found it really hard to physically move. I remember somebody walking their dog, and I was trying to get out of their way, and I swear I just couldn't move, and that was really difficult. And then nobody
mm.
believed you. They thought you were making it up. And I was like, man, you really think I want attention for this? Like, I can think of a million other things I'd rather do. I would jump
Yeah.
off of a cliff to get attention rather than be bedbound and unable to like gather my
Mm,
thoughts.
mm,
And
mm,
the
mm.
scariest thing in the beginning is I would get lost in my own house. Like, I'd be like, where
Wow.
am I? Yeah. And
Yeah,
it took my
that's wow.
crazy, right?
Yeah.
And the story when
Mm,
everybody knew something was wrong was I would fight with everybody because I had dementia, right? I don't know. I'm like, I didn't say that. I didn't do that. What are you talking about? Right.
yeah.
And
Mm,
so my husband called my best friend. He's like, help me out here. And so my best friend comes to town and I walk in the room and I say one thing, right? And then I walk out of the room and I walk back into the room and I say something completely different. And then my husband goes, well, you just said this. And I go, no, I didn't. I didn't say that. And my best friend looks at
wow.
me and she's
Mm,
like, yeah, you did. And I was like, oh my God.
mm, mm,
And that was like the moment I knew
mm, mm.
something was really wrong.
Wow.
And,
Mm,
you know, nobody
yeah.
can like really believe that,
Mm, mm.
somebody who
So
wasn't in the
yeah,
room.
yeah, 100%. Thanks for sharing, Danielle. Sure, that's a really tough symptom. I relate to the sense in terms of short-term memory and brain fog. I have a similar condition. I wouldn't say it's I forget where I am in the house or anything, but I would take a tablet or something like a supplement, and 5 minutes later I have no idea if I've taken it or not, and I'm like, should I take it in case I didn't take it, or should I just leave
Hmm.
today because I don't know if I took it? And I understand the level of memory loss, and I think it's to do with the microclots in the blood, the blood vessel damage, but there's also, like you say, neurological damage of some sort. I'm still figuring out what that is. I wanted to ask, sorry, just remind me the date of that infection. When was that?
Oh, September 28th, 2020. So
2020. That's
what
like
was
right like within a year of the start of the pandemic. That's really
I
early. Yeah.
got the original one.
Wow.
So
Yeah. And
yeah,
this is
and
before
so
vaccines or anything out, eh?
100%, because the number one
Yeah.
question I get
Yeah.
is, did the vaccine do it to you? That's the
Yeah.
number one
Yeah.
question I
Yeah.
get. And I was like, it
Yeah.
wasn't even there. And I can't tell you how much hate that I get that says the vaccine was there all along,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
You're vaccinated.
Yeah. I was
That's
like,
my
oh,
number one comment on my video. My first video was, oh, obviously it's the vaccine. I mean, oh, long COVID isn't real. Well, that whole thing. Oh man, it's
it's
hard. Yeah.
crazy. But you have to tell those people,
Yeah.
hey, listen,
Sure.
I'm looking
Yeah.
for a cure. And if you believe in long vax, you got to believe in long COVID. And they target
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
same thing. So, and
Yeah.
we all need help. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Long vax isn't more important than long COVID. Long COVID isn't more
Mm,
important than long vax. We got to
yeah.
work together, right?
Yeah.
Um, but being a
So
health
I.
provider, oh, go ahead.
Mhm. Sorry, sorry to jump in. I was going to say I agree with you in the sense that I believe right now, from what I've learned the last 3 years of being ill with this condition, is that the common denominator of both the vaccine and the virus is the spike protein that's causing
Hmm.
effects. I can't say it's going to hurt everyone because I know a lot of people who took the vaccine who are absolutely fine. A lot of people who've had COVID are absolutely fine. And it's that trick of like understanding why did this happen to some people and not others? Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to
Yeah.
say. Yeah. Yeah, carry
No,
on.
no, but you bring a really good point. So the one thing we can all remember is HIV, right? And initially with
Mm,
HIV, a lot of people died.
mm,
Some people
mm.
survived and they developed a chronic illness, correct? And then some
Yeah.
people were
Mm,
completely unaffected, right? And this is
mm,
what we're
mm,
looking at. And long COVID and COVID itself is very much like HIV. It's able to cross over the blood brain barrier. And that's what
mm,
they have in
mm,
common. And so the immunotherapies that were developed, right, for people
mm,
with
mhm.
HIV has allowed them to live long and better lives, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes even with medicine, it works for some people and then it doesn't work for another. We're all individuals.
Mm, mm.
And so if you
Yeah, I
ask
think,
me what,
yeah.
go ahead. I'm
No, so I was
sorry,
going to say
talking too
HIV
much.
AIDS, I believe is quite a big issue in South Africa. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but people can
Mm,
remember that, right? And so they can
yeah.
relate to that. Um, for me, what was I going to tell you? I was going to tell you something about it. I was saying HIV and AIDS, and then, uh,
Immunotherapy, blood
mm,
brain barrier.
yeah. Um,
Everyone's
see,
unique.
see, yeah, but this is what having
What
long COVID
happened? Yeah.
is.
I
I'm like
didn't say
super
that. Yes, you
articulate,
did. No, I
and then
did.
I'm just like, it's like, let me look in that card catalog in my brain.
Yeah.
Um, but I can't imagine what it was like for people who didn't have any like clinical expertise or didn't know how to advocate for themselves or even could relate to, what's happening to me. I mean, what was that like for you when you didn't know what was happening to you? It was completely terrifying, I imagine.
Devastating. Yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
and so I remember early on whenever I was first struggling, it was like you could see the doctor if you had two negative tests, right? And by the time I met that criteria, then it was you have to meet them. Oh no, first it was you have to be fever free for 3 days to go to the doctors. And I met that
Mm, mm,
criteria after like 10 or I think it was 10 to 12 days I was fever free, right? So then it became two negative COVID tests. And then that took me a lot longer to have two negative COVID tests. And
mm.
then I think I got sick in September, but I didn't see a doctor until November because
Wow.
of the changing requirements to be seen.
Yeah.
And I'd had this primary care since 2007. And he's a great doctor, like no question, but he was older and he had to protect himself. And I respect that, right?
Mm, mm,
Um, but so then they started referring me out to infectious disease doctor, cardiologist, pulmonologist, neurologist, you name it, right? And
mm,
the problem was before I ever had COVID, before the pandemic, all of these people were hard to get a hold of anyways, right?
mm,
So
mm.
now my primary care is calling me and he's like, why haven't you seen them? I'm like, I can't even move. Like I can't even pick up my arm, like I'm
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
here. And then I got in with the infectious disease doctor, which was an HIV doctor. And it was in, I want to say December or January that I found out he told me about long COVID. What,
Mm,
like you, it's like my titers were really high. My Epstein
mm,
Barr was high.
mm-hmm.
Coxsackie was high. Cat scratch fever was high.
Mm.
HSV1 was high. Um,
Wow.
all
So
of them,
are
right?
these all dormant viruses that they've picked up
All
now?
dormant viruses. So if you ask me, why did it happen to
Wow.
me? Is that I got
Mm.
COVID and then it reactivated all of these viral loads and destroyed my nervous system.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Mm, mm,
I
mm.
understand that from like bone marrow transplant and all these other areas of health, you know? And
Okay.
so I went and I saw a neurologist, and, I work with an oncologist. So I can appreciate every kind of doctor. Some have good bedside
Mm,
manner and some don't, and some only work in numbers, and they're all very different. And usually the really
mm,
good ones have the worst bedside manner,
mm,
the
mm.
worst. Um, so I knew something was wrong. I knew I needed an MRI, and I was able to advocate for myself, but I had to, like, it was a fight, right? And then
Yeah. Yeah.
eventually I found out I had lesions all over my brain. And so many
Mm,
people who have long COVID, um, the brain is the last place that anyone goes. So
mm,
whenever he saw those, he kind of brushed them off. He says, well, we'll only repeat another MRI if you produce more symptoms. Well, guess what? Just a couple
mm,
months later, I'm producing more symptoms. I got a neuropsych eval. I got that psychosomatic thing. I got, all the pushback. Even though I
mm.
knew, like, good or bad stress, it's still stress. So even
Yeah.
if I was
Yeah.
happy to see one hug my children, I would still get tremors, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they were pronounced and they were scary. And then I would be sleeping for days. And all of us
Mm.
know what this is like, right?
Yeah.
So um what actually happened and how I started my journey to recovery. Like, I did all the things you could do at home. I understood and studied everything that I possibly could about ancestral living, which is kind of the foundation for how I live now. Revolutionary Medicine is a great book. It's about our first five presidents writing letters back and forth during their lifetime and how they survived and lived to be of an old age of 60 or 80. So I highly recommend that book. Um, so the moment when I felt like everything changed for me, it was on Mother's Day, I think on 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And I went fishing with my sons because I used to go fishing. I was a Boy Scout mom, I was the baseball mom. I did like everything.
Mm,
And I felt well enough to go fishing. And I'm out there cranking, cranking, cranking. Oh my God, I starting my heart. Oh my God, I'm stuck. I can't breathe. And the guy's looking at me. He's like, you're all right. Yeah, hold on to that pole. It's like, well, if you want to keep your pole, you better grab it right now, buddy. And
mm,
like my husband looked at me, and then I had a hard time breathing. I was like, oh shit.
mm,
And I knew because I hated when my kids saw me go down the tubes because it was terrifying for them when I couldn't talk and when I
mm.
couldn't walk and when I couldn't move. And I can't even imagine what it's like for my children. Right.
Yeah.
So I had post exertional malaise. If you don't know what that is,
Mm.
you should look it
I
up.
do. I do.
And so then I crashed, right? And then
Mm,
Monday morning, I go to take my kids to school. And I felt like, oh no, that's just getting in the car, not making them breakfast, not getting them ready, not doing anything for them, but just literally getting them in the car and driving them to school. And then, of course, I have all the things, right? And my blood pressure was, I think it was, see if it was like 141 over 110. I can't remember the numbers right now, but I've
mm,
done
mm,
other reports, so you can go back and watch those. And then my
mhm,
heart rate was like through the roof, and I thought I was having a heart attack. So I drove myself to the emergency room. And this was the game changer for me because I had already self-referred myself to the Mayo Clinic, and I was going to get treated for central sensitization syndrome. That's also something you can look up. And Dr.
Okay.
Sletton, he runs the clinic. That's another great thing that people can learn about.
Mm-hmm.
And the nurse who was doing my cardiac workup, like, I couldn't even remember like what she looked like. All I remembered was her eyeballs. That's how,
Mm.
that's how stressed out I was. And
Wow.
she had met Dr. Well, she had met Lori the weekend before, and she worked for a clinic called Aviv. It's in the Villages in Orlando here. And
Okay.
she told me Dr. Mo Elamir is coming here to Advent Health, and they're going to be doing a presentation. Can I present him? Can I present you to him? I'm like, absolutely, 100%. And what Dr. Mo does at Aviv Clinics is he does hyperbaric oxygen therapy treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So I had already had experience with hyperbaric oxygen therapy treatment with kids and radiation burns, and I already kind of had an understanding of how hyperbarics worked.
Mm.
So, she presented him to me, and then I knew and understood what they were describing in their treatment protocol, and I was like, game on.
Mm.
So, I really didn't ask that many questions, and I just knew it was sounded like the only thing that was going to be the first kind of treatment to heal the structural damage, because all of us with
Mm.
long COVID, right? You have an initial structural injury, and
Yeah.
then you have a metabolic injury, right?
Mm.
We have a
Mm.
manufacturing problem. We don't make enough healthy cells to replace the ones that we've used or to
Mm.
overcome the damaged ones that remain, right?
Wow. Mm.
Yeah. So
Mm.
then I went to
Mm.
Mayo for central sensitization, and I'll give you a brief summary of it. It's
Yeah.
try to unsensitize a sensitized sensory cell, and say that 3 times.
That's a tongue twister of note. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
so most people will have a hard time understanding what it is, but I encourage everyone, because I have a website, it's Longevity for the Long Haul.
Mm.
Everything on there is free. There's all the tools, all the things, because our community is disabled, and we're not working, so we don't have money, and so it's
Mm.
been my goal to actually educate people on the things that I've learned. Um, so, and one of the things that I use, it's called the Whoop. I don't know if you've heard about it, and I use
No.
the Garmin. So,
Okay.
um, Ian Poulter is my neighbor, and he's a
Mm-hmm.
golfer. I'm sure a lot of people know who he is. And I had
Mm-hmm.
been using the Apple Watch right before that. And by the time my Apple Watch notified me, it was too late. Right. And so these
Mm.
elite athletes use this Whoop device, right, to increase
Yes.
their performance. Well, I hacked their algorithm to basic metabolic function. So where they're trying to get it to increase their performance, I'm trying to increase
Mm.
my metabolic function. They both kind
Okay.
of go hand in hand. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you become part of this chronically ill community, right, um, you don't really think about athletic tools that could actually benefit you. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's how I do my pacing. And so
Mm-hmm.
Visible is another app that people use, and the science behind them are very similar. But the reason why I don't use Visible is because of the questionnaires. And the
Mm.
questionnaire for me is related to neuroplasticity. So I don't really like to talk about my symptoms. I will go about my day. And if I'm struggling, I'll say, I was at the grocery store and I was experiencing symptoms, because
Mm.
I used to have highways of pain and country roads of comfort. And so I understand. I have had a lot of treatment, and I've been through a lot of different things. So a lot of this doesn't sound familiar to a lot of people, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but I use the Garmin, and then all of
Mm.
these devices, um, I modify them. So when I tell people I went to bed 40 and I woke up 80, when I'm setting up the baseline for these devices, in the beginning, I set them up as if I were 80 years old. So then I
Mm.
didn't overexert myself past what my body limitations were, right?
I see.
So Outlived, do you know who Peter Attia is?
No.
I
No
love
idea.
him. Do you know who Inago San Milan is?
No. You'll have to send
Okay.
me these links after this so I can put them
Well,
below.
all of this is on my website. So you can just go to my
Perfect.
website and just eat it
I
all up.
will, yeah, everyone, I'm going to link Danielle's website below. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like
Mm,
you can just look at it, and some
mm,
things will work for some people and some things won't work for others. But
mm,
the reality is, we're
mm.
not alone. We're not, we've been here all along, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
now as a community, we have to work together and help one
Mm,
another
yeah,
to be better, you know? So,
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
Danielle,
And
sorry. I wanted
mhm,
to jump in there. Sorry. I was very interested to hear more about the MRI you did. It was something
okay.
I would love to do if I had the money to do so. Unfortunately, I don't have medical aid at the moment, just because of the costs of all the meds and supplements and everything I've been on. I canceled that a few years ago. But in terms of that scan and the lesions they found, is a lesion like a little injury, like to the blood vessel? Or when you say lesion, what does that mean?
It's like a calcification.
Okay.
So
Like a
it's like
buildup
a little
of tissue
scar.
or
It's a
okay, okay.
scar. And so these were neurological pathways that we used to be able to use. And then
Mm,
now
mm,
that pathway is no longer available. And
I
as
see.
you know, we only use 20% of our brain, right? So then you
Mm,
can retrain your brain and learn to do these things again. Um,
mm-hmm.
so with the brain scans, there are lots of them. The MRI showed the structural injury, but what's called a SPECT scan, SPECT scan,
Mm,
shows the
mm,
metabolic function of your brain. And to
okay.
me, that's more important. If
Mm,
you've got an injury and you broke your bone and it healed, right?
yeah.
That's done. But if you can look at your actual metabolic function of your brain and improve your metabolic function of your brain, then
Mm,
you know you can kind of move on. I do a lot of what's called zone 2 training, and a
yeah.
lot of us in this world, right, understand what exercise does to us. I'm not
Mm,
recommending anybody go out there and exercise, but with the Whoop, I have been able
mm,
to monitor every single intervention to see if it has a positive or a negative impact. I
yeah.
use the, like, to take a shower, I will mark it as a different activity. And I will see the strain that it takes for me to take a shower, the strain that it takes for me to do laundry. And I'm
Mm,
just training to do everyday life activities, right?
wow. Yeah.
Um, but the zone 2 training is related to ancestral living. It's that low level exertion, pretty damn
Mm-hmm.
boring. Most people hate it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, and before I could walk, because I used to only be able to walk like a quarter of a mile around the corner.
Yeah.
And I got to where I could walk 5 miles and then ride my bike 10
Mm,
miles before I had a relapse this last July.
okay.
So it's like starting over with experience. I don't want people to feel like really sad. But um,
Mm,
so how I learned about zone 2 is Dr. Inago Samilon. So he
mm,
taught type 1 diabetics to become elite athletes. So then I went over here to the performance center and I had a lactate test done to show,
mm,
like, they put you on there, and I knew, like, I budgeted it into my pacing schedule. I knew if I
yeah.
was going to do this activity, then I was going to be out. And so I made the
Mm-hmm.
plan for that. And they do a blood test to show how quickly lactate builds up in your blood. And
Mm,
apparently, I was worse than a type 2 diabetic. Like, I wasn't even on the chart. Like, I could
wow.
just show you a picture of what it actually looked like. And like, we're looking
Yeah.
for evidence, right? We're looking for evidence of
Mm,
what does this disease look like, right?
yeah. Please send that across. I'll try to put it in the edit if I can. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so zone 2 training is a big part. And it's walking. And so walking is important because we're using our femurs. And where do we produce stem cells? In our
Uh,
femurs.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
we haven't evolved to live a sedentary lifestyle, and we are not using our body the way that it's created. And we're stuck in this hell inside of our own bodies. Because don't get me wrong, I'm not telling
Mm,
people to exercise outside of their recovery level. I'm not
mm,
asking people to exert strain past the recommendations on these apps. I'm just asking you to consider learning how to create energy efficiency. Because some
mm.
days on my Whoop, I will wake up and just open my eyes, and my strain level was a 4. And then on other mornings, I will open my eyes and it will be like 0.02. So
Mm.
that gives me a heads up when I'm energy efficient or I
Yeah.
am not.
Yeah. Mm.
And a lot of us don't know about these tools. A lot of people don't know how to use them. We're intimidated by, you know, how other people use them.
Mm.
Because the HRV, you've heard of heart rate variability.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one of those things. So when my titer levels are high, my HRV is low.
Mm.
And whenever, and so the goal isn't, because everybody's HRV is individual. So you can't compare yours to the next person, right?
Mm.
My average HRV when I first started targeting and training my HRV was 26. And for my
Mm.
age, it should be 45. And you can
Yeah.
go and you can look at those numbers too.
Mm.
The good thing about monitoring your overall health and performance, like I know, like the Garmin, it
Mm.
doesn't, the only thing that it does is it tells you if your HRV is balanced. And I value that from the Garmin. The
Yeah.
Garmin doesn't give me the same kind of information on recovery and sleep that the Whoop does. So I feel like,
Mm.
people use the Aura Ring. I literally used all of them. And just because I wanted to be fair and I wanted to understand which one was going to give me real time information. And
Mm.
we just don't know what
Mm.
is and isn't working for us.
Yeah.
And we lack
Mm.
research and education and we lack support. And,
Yeah.
literally that's why, like this Monday, I'm going to Washington with my daughter. I'm part of ME
Mm.
Action, I'm a volunteer.
Yeah.
And we're going to go protest. And I don't know if you can see it, but it says
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
SOS. So that
Yeah.
stands for
Yeah.
Save Our Science, Save Our Society, and Save Our Support System.
Mm.
Because here in the US, we've been leading the way for in so many different areas, and specifically in long COVID. Like we had a
Mm.
long COVID advisory board that was
Mm.
established within like 4 years. We had long COVID clinics, long COVID funding, and all
Mm.
of that has changed. And
Yeah.
the federal government and executive branch is like going in a different direction. And
Mm.
that's something, we have to advocate for our rights while we have them. And we have to allow people
Mm.
to see, what it looks like in the future. So
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
any action is
Mm.
like myalgic encephalomyelitis. You had heard of it before, right?
Yeah. I know it. Yeah.
So for me, my belief as a healthcare practitioner, I'm not a doctor and I'm not here to um, tell people that this is what it is, but this is my personal belief. This isn't necessarily something that's adopted by the healthcare community. But
Mm.
I believe ME is the disease pathway, or this is the disease progression of long
Mm.
COVID, because people with
Mm.
ME, they could get the flu, they could get mono, they could be in a car accident, there could be something that triggers an immune response in the body that
Mm.
um, presents this type of illness. And
Yeah. Yeah.
depending on what your weakness is in your body, right?
Mm.
That is the system that's most affected.
Yeah.
So,
I'll be honest. I before the pandemic and all of this, I just thought the whole, like how can your mind and positive thinking and all this brain retraining affect your physical body? And I used to think, that doesn't sound right. But also, like you say, this physical injury, what has it done to our brains and like our wiring and our neuro pathways and things? I thought that was a load of hocus pocus. But the reason one of the reasons I've learned about the importance is that a couple of years ago, it was actually during the pandemic, I'd been cycling with a friend. We came through an area in Cape Town called Woodstock. Just as dusk was setting, the two of us cycling along, we'd gone to Camps Bay and back, like a good 50K cycle. In miles, it's probably 30 miles or so. and we actually got attacked on our bicycles by two guys with these big sticks. They tried to rob us of our bicycles. And the reason I mention is that for 2 weeks post that, I had my first experience of PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. And I literally had anxious and knot stomachs and stress and like this like cold sweats. And I was like, what is going on? Like, this event has happened. It's in the past, but how is my body still reacting to this attack and this trauma? It's incredible how powerful the mind is, and all these systems in our bodies like interconnected. In terms of that, I wanted to ask, have you looked at anything like the polyvagal theory, like vagal nerve stimulation, or breathing techniques? Are there anything like that you've looked at? Yeah.
Yeah. So in the beginning, before things were available, I used a device that went on my head, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because for years before hyperbarics, I had debilitating headaches and I had vision problems, balance problems. And
Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
Is this post-COVID or pre-COVID?
that's post-COVID. I was
Post-COVID,
never
yeah, yeah.
sick before COVID. Um,
Wow, yeah.
but yeah, so like the vagus nerve, there's so much science in that. And so then you get back to ancestral living, right? Humming, singing. Like before I could even walk to get into zone
Mm-hmm.
2, I sang,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't sing very
Wow.
well. You know what I'm saying? And my daughters can sing,
Yeah, yeah.
but you sing, right?
I do, yeah. Not as well as I used to. I think it's depending on energy.
Yeah, but that is
Yeah,
that is zone 2 training too. Like, because before I
I
could walk,
see.
before I could
Yes, I've heard
sit,
about humming and singing. Yeah, amazing.
and that
That is so
stimulates your
cool.
vagus nerve. Yeah. So
Yeah. Okay.
when you study ancestral living and you learn how they lived and you learn what they did do, like then you're like,
Mm,
Have you
mm.
heard of the book Outlive?
I have not. We will have
Okay.
to put all the links
Yes.
in the channel description,
Oh yeah. Well,
video
all the
description.
things
Yeah.
are on my
Yeah.
not my podcast, but they're
But
all
your
in
website. Perfect.
my website.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my favorite thing to tell people to do you know who Liam Hemsworth is?
Yes,
Or,
Chris
or is
Hemsworth
it
brother.
Chris?
I know
Or
I know Thor. Thor is Chris, and
Thor. Yeah,
Liam
Chris. That's
is
what I'm
the
talking
guy
about.
in Hunger Games.
Yeah, yeah. So Chris Hemsworth has a show
Yeah.
on Disney Plus. Have you seen it?
Yes, I have seen that. Yes.
Okay. I always tell
Isn't
people
it
on episode
Unlimited or something, or
Limitless.
Limitless,
Yeah.
or yes, yes, yes.
Peter Attia is in there. Peter Attia
Okay,
is the
okay.
doctor that fasts with him.
Okay,
And that's
wow.
how I
Wow.
found him. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I always tell people I'm episode 5 and 6. So, when they put the aging
Yes, yes,
suit
yes.
on. And so a
Okay.
lot of us can't relate to the loss, right? And the
Wow.
change. But now you can see right?
Mm. Mm. I must try to
hmm
get Chris on the podcast. So
Yes, Chris, please.
I'll mail his
Um,
agent.
yeah, mail him, let him know.
Hope he doesn't charge me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, sorry, in terms, okay, so you've mentioned hyperbaric oxygen therapy, ancestral living, and you've
Mhm.
also mentioned the vagal nerve and that kind of stuff. Are there any things medicine wise and supplement wise that you found beneficial over the last 3-4 years?
Yes. I know I had mentioned the movie Unrest to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great movie. There's a doctor in there. Her name is Dr. Klimas. She's here at NSU. And
Mm-hmm.
she has been working with the ME community in long COVID. She actually has a study that's open. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I started taking low-dose naltrexone,
Yes, heard of
and
it.
I'm pretty sure, like a lot of people, without monitoring your biometrics, it's
Mm,
really hard to know if something's working for you because we are, you know, overcome with all the symptoms and things like that. So
mm, mm,
I wore my Whoop through hyperbarics, through central sensitization training, through
mm,
anything that I tried. I could
mm.
use my Whoop to let me know if it was or if it wasn't working for me. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So I did low dose naltrexone. I did intuitive fasting by Dr. Will Cole. I really liked him,
Mm,
but until when people start changing, I love what Dr. Cole has to talk about and what he's writing about, but I don't like what
mm, mm.
kind of how he's aligned himself in a different way. But Dr.
Okay.
Will Cole, his book, Intuitive
Mm-hmm.
Fasting,
Okay.
excellent. Um,
Mm-hmm.
So everything that I've done, like I've studied the immune system. I've even studied, and Dr. Myhill, do you know who she is? Dr. Sarah
No.
Myhill. Oh my God. You're gonna have
We're
so
in
much
our
fun
little
with all
Cape
these
Town
people.
bubble. Yeah, yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
Okay, so Dr.
Yeah.
Myhill, I'm gonna just read something out of her book. I have it right here,
Yeah, please do.
because it's so amazing. And I was gonna have her on my podcast, and I was gonna talk to her, and I just, with my disease and everything that's going on, I haven't been able to do it. But
Mm-hmm.
let me see. This is such a good thing that everybody needs to know. And the main thing I learned from her is like energy is money. And if you can't
Mm.
make it, you can't spend it. You can't borrow it from
Yeah.
yesterday, and you can't borrow it from tomorrow. And
Wow.
yeah.
That's a
So
powerful thought. Sure.
yeah, right.
Mm.
So I'm gonna see if you can see this. Can you see this? I'm gonna read it to
Yes.
you.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay. It says the energy delivery in the body. Think of your body as a car. The engine is your mitochondria. Your your fuel is your diet and your gut function. Your oxygen is your lungs. The fuel and oxygen delivery system is your heart and your circulation. Your accelerator pedal is your thyroid gland. Your gearbox
Mm.
is your adrenal glands. Your service
Wow.
and repair is your sleep, and your toolkit is your methylation cycle. And cleaning oil is your oxidants, and your catalytic converter is your detoxification, and the driver is the brain in the state that it's in.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
and to me, the way she looks at everything, and you always have to be very careful when you're dealing with your own health. What works for me is not going to work for you. And
Yeah.
a lot of people feel like, I've tried this, I've tried that, and I'm like, listen, it's okay. It's the state of negative growth. And negative growth is
Mm.
that you did
Mm.
something and that it didn't work from you, you know?
Mm.
And going to the doctor, we all go to the doctor and they think, oh, we have this. And we're like, oh, yes, I'm going to get a diagnosis. I'm going to get treatment. And they're like, you don't have it. And
Mm.
that's what's called negative growth. You have to eliminate a lot of things. But I
Yeah.
feel like
Yeah.
as a community, we've been walking blind.
Mm.
Like we don't know
Mm.
what is and what isn't working for us, because I feel it's very
Mm.
cell cycle specific. And it takes, in order to produce healthier cells, it takes several months of doing the same thing to know if it actually works.
Yeah. Yeah.
So usually most people give up a
Wow.
month or 2 months after they've tried to do something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and
Yeah.
that comes from my bone marrow transplant experience,
Mm.
understanding how to, replace someone's complete immune system, you know.
Wow.
So
Sorry, was
I'm
that for your pediatric cancer patients?
yeah,
So
pediatric and
child
adults.
child cancer. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I've
Yeah.
done both,
Wow.
I've
Yeah.
done adults and pediatrics. And I think the thing that's unique is like I've watched, I was a doctor's nurse. So once they got
Mm.
their roadmap, I was with them from the beginning to the end. Whether they died or whether they lived, I was with them.
Mm. Yeah.
And I will
Mm.
tell you 100%, whether they lived or whether they died, their their attitude was everything.
Wow. Mm.
People who had a negative attitude that is justifiable and 100%, um, I would say suffered more. And I would say the ones that
Mm.
had a positive attitude, but also had the support systems that you would need
Mm.
to have a positive, attitude,
Mm.
I experienced some of the most beautiful deaths. So,
Wow. Yeah. On that note, sorry, I think it's obviously quite a controversial thing right now. I think there's a lot of mistrust with the vaccines in general because of the mRNA
mhm,
injuries and deaths that occurred post-vaccine. But in terms of your viewpoints on the vaccination, I imagine in your medical field as a nurse and a doctor's assistant, you mentioned you would have had been mandated at the point that the vaccines were released, I imagine. But you've expressed before, I think we started the call officially, that you um, had this infection, obviously prior to the development of any vaccine. So, what were
mhm.
what was your thinking around vaccines, whether you should get it or not get it, after your infection? Yeah.
I was very big on masking and very big on getting the vaccine. And it was
Hmm.
for a few reasons, but I know vaccine reactions and injuries have always existed since the beginning of time. Like you
Mm,
can look at
mm.
somebody in the ME population, it could be a vaccine that triggered their disease, or it
Yeah,
could be an
yeah.
infection that triggered a disease. What I know about vaccines, like mRNA, they
Mm,
used it for rabies and they use it for
hmm.
something else. And it's okay when people have hesitations. And I am somebody who does believe in vaccination. When I got sick, I
Mm,
understood that there was a 40% chance if I got vaccinated that it was going to have a negative impact on me. And so I
mm,
had to be sure that I was making the right decision, um, because I was having a hard time living the way that I was at that point. Um,
mm,
and I have a lot of experience in vaccines and patients and things like that. And I
mm,
don't
hmm.
invalidate the vaccine injury is 100% real. We are one and
Mm,
the same. It's just what makes someone react to a vaccine and someone else not react to the vaccine.
mm, mm.
And sorry, my friend's calling me. She always does this. Um, but anyways,
I'm on a podcast. Can you just leave me?
yes, but no, so you
Yeah.
can like have a legitimate vaccine injury, but
Mm,
I believe in vaccines overall. And if you understand how vaccines were created, milkmaids didn't get smallpox, right? And the whole reason why we started doing inoculations was rich people were left with these huge gaping scars in their face, but then they looked at the milkmaids, in that Christmas song, seven maids of milking, six, and whatever. And
yes, yes,
I
yes.
can't,
Yeah.
right? Well, those maids of milking looked really good because they were exposed to cowpox, which prevented them to getting smallpox. And so that's how
Wow.
vaccinations. Wait, I'm about to blow your mind about vaccinations.
I didn't know that.
Hold
Yeah,
on. I want to talk
yeah.
to you about
Mm,
anti-venom. Okay.
mm, mm,
So there's a guy that lives here in Orlando, and we started talking about how anti venom was created. It was created the same way that vaccinations were created. They
mm.
would inject a small amount of venom into a sheep, right?
Yeah.
And then the sheep would elicit an immune response, and then that immune response would create the anti venom. That is the
Mm,
same way they create vaccines. So if you got bit
mm.
by a snake, would you want to get the anti venom? The answer is
Yeah,
yes, right? But
yeah.
people don't know how similar, like these are very similar processes. These are,
Mm,
you know, but I get the frustration with the healthcare community. I'm
yeah,
frustrated with the health
yeah,
and wellness community. I'm frustrated with everybody. We're stuck in between. And the healthcare
yeah.
system is shaming me
Mm,
for the health and wellness, and the health and wellness is shaming me for the healthcare system. But
yeah,
they're
yeah.
both making money, right? And we're not getting
Mm,
better, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
to me, we need both of them. It's a little
Mm,
bit of both. And
mm,
so I've got vaccinated since I've had my whoop on. So I was able to
mm,
look at that. I've studied like everything. I'm a geek.
mm.
Can't help it. And
Sorry,
I
tell
was
me,
so
sorry to jump in. Tell me about that timeline. So infection, September 2020, 2020. And when were
uh-huh.
your first vaccines that you took? Yeah. Or how many did you
I
get? Yeah.
think it was in June 2021 or June 2022. I will get back to
Okay.
you with that specific date because
Mm,
my
mm,
brain doesn't
mm,
work the
mm.
same. Um, but
Yeah. Tell us about the changes. Yeah. If was there any positive benefit, any
yeah.
negative benefit? Like, was it neutral? Yeah.
So initially, the first couple days, I did have like I would call like a flare, like I was exhausted, I was tired. I
Mm,
consider
mm,
when my
mm.
symptoms increase, that's significant.
Yeah.
So, but then I experienced like my first kind of relief from like I felt like a decrease in inflammation.
Yeah.
And so when I get vaccinated, it's strongly correlated to my whoop. So it's not
Mm,
if I'm going to get vaccinated, it's when I'm going to get vaccinated. Because, like with a whoop, they'll tell you if you're having a red day, a yellow day, or a green day. Well, if I've had
mm.
3 red days in a row, do you think, even though I haven't had a fever, even though I don't have any pronounced symptoms, should I get a vaccination? The answer is no.
Mm,
If I'm a yellow, I'm not going to do it either. If I'm
mm,
green for 3 days, right? That means I
mm,
have a high recovery level. My body is in a good place. Yes. The answer is yes. It's not if
mm.
I'm going to get a vaccine, it's when I'm going to get a vaccine. And if
Okay.
my body is functioning at its best level, then that's what I'm going to do. But
Mm,
I'm not going to say, oh, you have to get vaccinated. You have to do this. But I would
mm,
urge everybody to begin to use a wearable device to have a greater understanding of
mm,
their bodies. So, what I have done on my website is that there's a
mm,
link. And if you use my code, which all I do is get like a free month of whatever, but I'm going to start hosting like
mm.
little Zoom classes to teach people how to use the Whoop for us.
Incredible. Yeah. Mm,
So I
mm,
don't want to get paid or anything, but if you use my link and then the Whoop sees that, hey, she's really getting a following there, I'll teach
mm,
you for the
mm,
first month how to use the Whoop, right? Um,
mm,
I teach people like on their red days, I want you to journal about what you did the day before. And then on your
mm,
green days, I want you to journal about the day before. And then once you stop doing the things that are putting you in a negative place and you increase the amount of things that are working for you, then
mm,
you just naturally move in the right direction. And that involves being around people who have a negative impact on your mental and physical well being.
mm,
That's
mm.
drinking alcohol, eating food. Um, the list goes on and on. And, you know, being able to see that, like I remember when I first started wearing the Whoop and I had a red day, I'd say, pick the top 3 things that you want me to do today. Right. And
Mm,
I'll get those done. And you can't use the Whoop the way it was created because if you look at it and then you follow its lead, you could potentially hurt yourself, right? Because
mm.
you don't
Into
want to.
pen,
So
yeah.
yeah, the pen.
Yeah.
And so whenever you get that green day, like I don't believe in the 90 to 100%
Yeah.
because I've studied on the Garmin where it shows you your HRV. And
Mm,
usually when I'm in that
mm.
90 to 100% on the Whoop, it'll
Yeah.
show because that's a huge jump in your HRV. It'll show
Mm,
on the Garmin that even at the top of your HRV, it's unbalanced.
mm.
There's a low unbalance of your HRV, and there's a high unbalance of your
Yeah.
HRV.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I
and this,
want to, sorry, I want to go back. I think it's important to
yeah,
clarify the overall reason for getting vaccinated post-infection. Why would you feel, I guess, the need to do that objectively if you had this natural immune response and you've already had the infection? Why do you think
well,
you would want to get it? Did you see it as like I'm hopeful that it might elevate my symptoms slightly? And right now, was there a net benefit in your perspective? Yeah.
it was a mediator, right? So
Okay.
when I got vaccinated after, it was like to
Mm.
train my immune system to
Mm-hmm.
target those cells and to minimize the impact of the infection that was currently brewing in my
I
system.
see. I see.
And
I see.
so,
Okay.
so for me, okay, just like with
Mm.
HIV, right, you start getting these immunotherapies, right? And for
Yes.
me, it just minimized my symptoms. My symptoms did not go away.
They were just
And
reduced.
then,
Okay.
yeah, and then the other thing
Mm.
is just like the flu, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and the coronavirus keeps changing
Mm.
and the changes in the virus, if I'm not protected in the changes against the virus, then it's going to come in and access some other pathway to increase my risk. But people who have a vaccine injury, they shouldn't get another vaccination. You
Yeah.
should
100%.
wash your hands, socially distance, wear a mask. So, like, I still wear a mask. And when do I wear a
Mm.
mask? So there's a few things, okay, that I would like to share with you that I learned
Mm-hmm.
from Dr. Klimas. So
Mm.
early on, I started putting Aquaphor on my nose because I knew, and I could show you pictures of COVID went into my brain and up like this and then bloomed like a flower. I have
Mm.
pictures of 3 brains where we have the same brain, and that was from the SPECT scan, right?
Wow.
And so I started putting the Aquaphor like a barrier in my nose to prevent the virus from
Okay.
getting past my mucosa and back into my brain. And
Mhm.
then I would wear a mask. And then I use Zicam. And Zicam is like a little Q-tip that you put in your nose that acts as a barrier as well. And I did that
Mhm.
without knowing that that was what you can actually do. So Zicam is a spray that you can put into your nose. Some people call it like the more organic, less chemical one is called
Mhm.
X Clear. So it's the word clear
Mm.
with the X in front of it.
Yeah.
So I always spray it in my nose. It lasts 12 hours. It
Mhm.
reduces the ability for viruses and bacteria to get through your mucosa. And
Mm.
then I wear a mask. I wear a mask in cars, small spaces like elevators, um, crowded places, airplanes, because even if you went back to like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson had this little battle. Benjamin Franklin would never sleep with somebody in a room with the windows closed because he associated infection with air quality, right? So Thomas
Mm.
Jefferson really didn't like hanging out with him that much or rooming with him. So they had beef.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
Benjamin Benjamin Franklin would sit naked in the cold weather, like he would cold plunge
Mm.
before it was like even
Wow.
a thing. So Benjamin Franklin was so cool. I think I would have
Interesting.
really liked him, you know.
Mm.
But Thomas Jefferson got his revenge because Benjamin Franklin died first, and he's like, "Yeah, it's because he left the window open." I'm like, "Oh,
Mm.
Tommy boy." But
Yeah.
that's why that book is so
Mm.
good. It's revolutionary medicine, and you're just reading
Mm.
letters between the first five presidents on how they lived their life, what they did to treat, you know, and why
Mm.
bloodletting became a thing. Like people don't even realize Thomas Jefferson owned enough slaves that he was able to rule out bloodletting as an ethical treatment, you know. Um,
I don't know what that is. What is bloodletting?
So bloodletting is where when people used to get sick and they
Yeah.
had like diabetes or whatever, that's how George Washington died. They would
Mm.
put a needle in and they would let you bleed it out. And so if it was an infection, you would get out extra white blood cells. You would lower somebody's sugar, you know,
Oh
you
my
would,
word.
this was an old thing that really should have
Yeah.
never been done. Right.
It's like
And
dialysis kind of thinking without replacing the blood, I guess.
exactly. And then
Wow.
even like Thomas John Adams, right? The whole reason why we won the Revolutionary War was because George Washington inoculated us against smallpox. And so they would say
Hmm.
that we lost 8 people to infection and one to the sword. And so
Wow.
George Washington was also so brilliant because he, you know about how malaria goes, right? And like
Yes.
right by the water and the yellow
Mosquitoes,
tree,
yeah.
the fever tree, whatever.
Okay.
So George Washington would never let people set up near a river. Um,
Mm.
he would never let them pee or poop near the camp. He made them wash their dishes, wash their clothes. Like he had
Mm.
all these like infectious disease things. There's another great
Mm.
book called Survival of the Sickest. You know that book?
Nope. Nothing. We'll have
It's
to have you back for a part two on the Library of Health
Yeah, yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah. There's so many. So Survival of the Sickest
Mm.
talks about how it pandemics and plagues would come through, and
Hmm.
then it would cause a genetic mutation, which would create a chronic illness. So tuberculosis, cystic fibrosis, malaria, sickle cell anemia, because people who have the sickled cell cannot get malaria, right?
Okay.
And
Hmm.
then hemochromatosis, like I could go on and on and on, right?
Mm. Mm.
Um, and it's really in studying the past that we can really understand what's going on now. Like if you were to have somebody like from George Washington come here during the
Mm.
pandemic times and see how people were reacting and how they're behaving, like
Mm.
they'd be like, no. But you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of us throughout history that have had ME, you know, like Florence Nightingale, you know.
I
Uh,
didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's why they have
Mm.
Emmy Awareness Day is on May 12th,
Wow.
which is her birthday,
I
right?
see. Mm.
And if you just go back and look throughout history, you know, Emmy has been
Mm.
around for 100 years. And so that's
Mm.
why we're also going to Washington, because they finally created a roadmap. And just like you'd use a roadmap for cancer treatment, this is a
Yeah.
roadmap for people living with ME.
Mm.
And the thing is like we're so like debilitated. We lack energy, and we have to manage our energy just to live our everyday
Mm.
life. It's like really difficult for us to get up
Mm.
and fight for our rights, fight for our health. And none of us want to
Mm.
be reliant on anyone else. I want to
Yeah.
be independent. I want to be strong. And
Mm.
so while I can, I'm going and I'm fighting back. And
Yeah.
um, so we were in the process of using like IVIG as a potential treatment, like the NIH,
Mm.
and people don't understand why cuts to the NIH or the CDC and all of these organizations matter. Well, they
Mm.
matter because pharmaceutical companies aren't going to do all the research that's needed to understand the different pathways of the disease.
Yeah.
So we use our tax dollars to do that research. So then once we figure out the scope of the disease process, then that gives pharmaceutical companies and providers avenues to target to treat, the our
Mm.
disease. And as it's just so crazy that we're going backwards. Like when we had HIV and
Mm.
AIDS, it took 10 years to create an advisory board. We created
Yeah.
one in 4 years. Most people don't remember when our president got COVID and he needed to be flown to Walter Reed. And
Mm.
there was somebody at the NIH who was able to approve unauthorized experimental treatment that potentially saved his life. And
Mm.
since he's had his infection, he's gone on to win another election, and he's our
Mm.
current president. And nobody's talking about his COVID infection because he received the right kind of care. And every American
Mm.
and every person in the world deserves the same opportunity to preserve their quality of life, to preserve like their dreams and their ambitions of who they want to be, what they want to do. And
Mm.
that's what I want people to remember. I don't have to be powerful or wealthy to be entitled to equal treatment.
Yeah.
And there are
Sorry,
things that are,
I want to jump in there. Sorry to interrupt. What was this treatment that he had that was helpful? Do we know what that was?
yeah, the treatment he got was a monoclonal antibody. He was taking
Mm.
supplements as well. You can Google it. It was a little cocktail. They created a cocktail for him.
Mm.
And
Mm.
one of those drugs is being looked at to treat, sorry, no pointing. One of those drugs is
Mm.
being looked at to treat long COVID. And so
Wow.
if you can use monoclonal antibodies to treat COVID, you should be able to use monoclonal antibodies to treat long COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the world,
Mm.
as far as economics go, and we're a global community, right? And
Mm.
me not being able to work and me not being able to do anything has put a major burden on my family, you know?
Mm.
And I find that like I've talked to so many people, and usually when you talk to them, a lot of them are suicidal, and I've
Mm.
heard so much with just people reaching out because we associate who we are with what we do. And when we can't do anything anymore,
Mm.
we lose our identity. And
Mm-hmm.
I was
Mm.
I was 100% in that position. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, I'm not a mother, I'm not a wife, I'm nothing. Like I can't, I'm laying here and I can't move. And not being able to move when I go through episodes of not being able to speak the way I want to,
Mm.
or not being able to
Mm.
move, it's very scary.
Wow.
But it's become a part of my life, and I've learned to manage, my symptoms, and I've learned what works for me. Like D-ribose is one of those substrates that are required to go back inside the cell and produce more energy. One of the
Okay.
things that I learned from Dr. Myhill was, so when I was talking about energy and making it, so
Mm-hmm.
usually when we're making energy, it's like ATP goes, when you're making ATP and AMP, or
Mm.
sorry, let me start over. So when you're trying to make energy,
Mm.
which is ATP, as it goes outside the cell, you produce one ATP and one AD, as in dog P, die. So T is
Mm,
for try, D is for
mm,
die. And then um, the D, the ADP, goes back inside the cell because it can, and then it can make more energy. But because we
mm,
have long COVID, guess what we make? A PP and a MP for mono. So because
mm,
it's a mono, it requires a substrate. And for me, um, I use D-ribose. Is I just add it to my water and it's a substrate. I
mm.
use creatine, but clean creatine, and that's the other problem is we're getting sold supplements that are not really good. And I also use hydrogen water. Echo
Okay.
Go is the only brand. Do not buy it off of Amazon. I don't recommend buying any supplements off of Amazon because you don't know what you're getting, right?
Sorry,
Um,
Jeff Bezos.
right? Sorry. Um, and then so I would love to tell people what
Mhm,
I do so then I can walk. Um,
mm,
so when I use my energy and I know I want to do something, I support myself with D-ribose, creatine, and um, hydrogen water because it decreases the oxidative stress in your gut and prevents you from creating more inflammation. So it meets you
mm,
right
mm.
where it starts. And
Okay.
then, so because I produce too much lactate when I move, right?
Mm,
And then I have a buildup in my system, like I use what's called an infrared sauna bag. So the infrared sauna bag, some of these toxins get stuck in our fat. And
mm,
before I could sing, before I could move, before I would do the infrared sauna bag because it allowed my skin to do what it was meant to do. Because if
mm.
I would move to sweat, then I would create post exertional malaise, right?
Yeah.
So on my
Mm,
green days, that's when I focus on um, making more energy, and that means walking. Then I will
mm,
walk for an hour, and then I will get into my infrared sauna bag for like 45 minutes. And then I will go into the shower. And the reason why I like the higher dose bag is it's adjustable heat.
mm,
Everything we do needs to be adjustable, customized, and personalized. So I get into the higher dose sauna bag and then I get into the shower. I still sit in the shower. Like I still can't stand up in the shower.
mm.
So, um, but then you
Wow.
walk all the toxins. And
Yeah.
then this is what works for me. This is what allows me to move a little bit more. And so
Mm,
when you watch, now you're going to go back and watch this. I'm telling you, when you go back
mm,
and watch Limitless, you're going to see the function
mhm,
of, sauna. You're going to see the function of cold plunge. So I love cold plunge, but physically, I'm not in the space that I can do cold plunge. But I know
yeah.
when I get there, I'll be able to do it and then it'll serve its purpose. Right. So everybody's not wrong with their recommendation. It's just for each individual person, you have to figure out what sequence of events works best for you.
Mhm,
I try to prevent athletic greens is another one of those things that I love. Um, because in the beginning when I couldn't get enough nutrients and everything I did is like I measured it on my whoop, right?
mm,
You could get athletic greens, you could use your whoop, and then you would be like, oh no, it's not for me, right?
mm,
But
mm,
it's about your gut health, you know. They know it lives like COVID lives in our gut. And then when we're
mm,
immunocompromised, it can like reactivate and then regain access to our circulatory system, right?
mm.
So I
That's
mean all of
scary.
that,
Very scary.
yeah, it's all out there.
Mm.
And so like right now, I'm starting to get a runny nose because I'm using my brain so much.
That's
But
okay.
but that's what happened, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's been a great conversation. Thank you so much, Danielle. I think we can close it there, and I'd love to have you back for a part two and just check in how you're doing and how your protest and Emmy awareness went on Monday, this coming
Yeah.
Monday. But yeah, in closing, I'd love you to just say one thing to encourage fellow people in the community, other long haulers, other people suffering with Emmy or a vaccine injury. What would you say to encourage them?
I would say number one, I believe you. Number two, you are not alone. And number three, we will get better together. because we don't need anyone to believe us. We have each other's back.